We are going to talk about our kidneys. We'd like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Kemi Osundina. She is a dedicated advocate at Sanofi, Sanofi, is that the company? At Sanofi, leading U.S. public affairs and patient advocacy transplant. Her work focuses on ensuring access to treatment for diverse populations and incorporating patient voices into transformative research. Thank you for that. Dr. Osundina brings a wealth of knowledge to this discussion, so please, let's give her another hand. Our next speaker, Dr. Silas Norman, a transplant nephrologist and clinical professor of medicine at the University of Michigan. Go Wolverines! He is a co-medical director of kidney and pancreas transplantation and focuses his research on reducing health disparities in kidney transplantation. He also serves on the boards including the National Kidney Foundation of Michigan and the American Kidney Fund. Last but not least, Steve Johnson from Denver, Colorado. He was diagnosed with lupus in 1996. He discovered he was born with one kidney and received a life-saving transplant from his brother. For over 20 years, Steve has thrived post-transplant, staying active with golf. What's your handicap? What's your handicap, Steve? Too high. Okay, that's okay. He rides his Harley and he's spending time with his grandkids. Passionate about helping others, he now represents Sanofi Genzyme through their Kidney Transplant Connectors program while working to make the transplant journey easier for others. Ladies and gentlemen, raffle holders, please give your undivided attention to our panel.
First of all, I just want to say thank you all for staying, being here since the morning. I know you're waiting on that raffle, but thank you for staying to get the education that you need. So we really appreciate it. All righty. So first of all, just to give you a little background about Sanofi, who are we? We're a global biopharmaceutical and healthcare company with one purpose: to chase the miracles of science to improve people's lives. For over 25 years in the US, we've been doing that specifically by being dedicated to the kidney transplant community and those with kidney disease that need a transplant. So I'm here today with Dr. Silas Norman from the University of Michigan and Steve Johnson, a two-time kidney transplant recipient. So before we get started, we don't have any slides today. We want this to be a true conversation. So Steve, why don't I start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and when you were diagnosed with kidney disease.
All right, Kimmy, thank you. First of all, I want to say how honored and proud I am to be here. We've been here all day and I've heard some awesome stories about people surviving and people also just being active in their communities about whatever their particular disease was or family member that they had a disease. So it's really been an honor to be here. But a little bit about me, and we'll get into more as we go on, but I'm 71 years old. I've been married to my wife, Kathy, for 30 years. We had two kids, both from previous relationships. Her have a son and we have a daughter. And her son is 49 and my daughter is going to be 40 in just a few days. So my daughter both of them have been through this whole journey of transplant with me from the very beginning. I was in 1996, I was diagnosed with lupus, and there was no family member of mine that had lupus. It wasn't in our family at all. No one had it. It was predominantly in women. I'm not a woman, so I just drew the short straw. But the ironic thing about my situation was when they found out they diagnosed me with lupus, as they were doing testing, they found out that I was born with just one kidney. And through playing high school sports and in college basketball, it never came up. It never came up. And so because I remember when the doctor came in and he asked me, he said, "Old football injury?" I said, "No." He said, "Were you in the service?" I said, "No." He said, "Wow, you're born with one kidney." And they thought that it might have shown up a lot earlier if I'd been a drinker. And I was never a drinker because my dad was an alcoholic, and I just never developed an affinity for alcohol. So that was a blessing there. But my brother donated, when he said he wanted to donate me the kidney, it was kind of crazy because I was going to the hospital to get, they put a graft in my left arm. And when he was dropping me at my regular clinic visit, the bandage fell off. And he saw the bandage fall off, and he was horrified. And he was just dropping me off, but he went to pull over and park. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going in, I'm gonna get tested." Now, he was a Denver fireman, he's retired now. But I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going in and get tested." I said, "No, you're not." We argued with that for a few minutes, but he hit me with the one thing that made me shut up. I said, "Okay, so what if something happens to your kidney?" He says, "Well, that's what I got my 3 sons for." So I didn't have any response to that, okay? So, Kimmy?
Thank you, Steve. And we appreciate the work that you continue to do and the advocacy that you're doing as our kidney transplant connector. Dr. Norman, let's go to you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you decided to focus your work in kidney disease and transplants?
No, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to start, just echo Steve. I think it's just been a really fantastic conference today. I've learned a lot, and as someone whose son has severe nut allergies, that last talk was particularly impactful for me. So I am a transplant nephrologist. I'm a medical transplant physician at the University of Michigan. And I'm also one of the medical directors for our kidney and pancreas transplant program at the University of Michigan. Early on, when I was thinking about becoming a physician, I had some recognition. Oh, can't hear? How's that? All right. When I was training early on and thinking about becoming a physician, I had some recognition of the increased kidney disease that we have in the Black community, and I wanted to come back and be able to be impactful and treat that disease. Through my training, I had the opportunity to meet a couple of great nephrologists that really helped me better understand kidney disease. And you know, as I got further into my training, trained with some of the transplant physicians, and again, really helped to focus my efforts on helping people move through the transplant process effectively. And I'll just close with one little disclosure that, of course, we're going to be talking about medical care, medical treatment today. So, of course, I want to emphasize that I'll be talking from my experience, from my practice, but of course, what I say may not be applicable to you and your specific conditions, and that, of course, decisions about your specific conditions should be a conversation between you and your physician, your care group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Norman. So let's dive in here. Thank you for giving a little bit of background on maybe kidney disease. So Dr. Norman, can you actually talk about when is the right time for a patient to go see a nephrologist, a kidney specialist? We heard a little bit about Steve's story and his journey, but in an ideal setting, when should they go see a kidney specialist?
No, thank you. So that's a terrific question. So earlier diagnosis is always better than later. And so for individuals who have chronic kidney disease, the sooner individuals can see a specialist, the better. Seeing a specialist early allows people to communicate with their healthcare team, find out what you need to know from the specialist so that you can slow down progression of kidney disease and hopefully preserve kidney function for as long as possible. Even though that's the best way for things to happen, unfortunately, we know in this country about 2/3 of people who develop kidney failure, the first time that they see a kidney doctor is when they crash on dialysis. And even if they have seen a kidney doctor before that, for most of those 2/3 of people, they've seen a kidney doctor for 12 months or less before they require dialysis. So earlier is better. And so although this is not what happens most of the time, what we want to emphasize is that the optimal way for this to happen is early care by a specialist so that we can learn what we need to know to preserve our kidney function for as long as possible.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about that dialysis. Steve, can you talk to us about your experience with dialysis and what people should know?
I don't know if I should be the person to talk about experience with dialysis because I actually didn't come to dialysis, it came to me. Like I said, when my brother first wanted to get tested to give me a kidney, it was because I'd been on dialysis for about a year, and my veins started collapsing, and they told me that I was going to have to go on the list. Now I have to go back and tell you that before being told that, you know, I was diagnosed with lupus and attacked my kidneys, I never knew one thing about kidney disease, nothing about dialysis, nothing about transplants. I knew none of that. So I was brand new to it. At the time, I used to call myself, I'm just a passenger on the train. And I had to try to figure it out as it went along. But so I got started on dialysis, and then they told me that my veins were collapsing. And that's how I got to my brother saying that he was going to give me a kidney. Now, I went to the hospital. I had my sister-in-law, who at the time was an emergency room nurse in Denver. She came by to see me because I'd been at home for like a month, bedridden. Couldn't figure out what was going on. And she came over, and the first thing she said was, this is not the flu. Because I had been to two different doctors, and they both said that I had the flu. So it was Christmas time in Denver in 1995, and so that kind of made sense. You know, it was cold and flu season, so I went along with it. But when my sister-in-law came by and she said, no, we have to go get an appointment to go see a nephrologist and a hematologist, blood doctors. So the first appointment I had available was 2 weeks. So I said, I'm not worried about it because I know he's going to say I've got the flu. 2 other doctors said it, so what's he going to be doing different? Well, after running a series of blood tests, they came into the room, and it was like Keystone Cops. I mean, everybody started moving back and forth, and I'm like, what's going on? And that's when the doctor told me, he says, well, I hate to tell you this, but why didn't you come in sooner? And I said, well, we thought you were going to say that I had the flu. He said, you don't have the flu, you're in total renal failure. And he said, I don't know if you're going to make it. And for me, it was a good thing to hear because I knew I didn't have the flu. I've been telling these doctors I did not have the flu because being an athlete, I knew I would just normally go to the gym and sweat it out, and I'd be all right. And so when my wife heard that, she started crying. And I said, no need to cry. You know, now we know what's going on, and we can get squared away. They took me right upstairs and started dialyzing me, right upstairs. And of course, you know, after a day of dialysis, I felt much better. But that wasn't a cure. You know, that was just something that was going to keep me alive. And I have to tell you, that's, as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Norman might disagree, but for me, dialysis it's not something that you really want to go through. I know he's going to say that. He's already said that, but the bottom line is that it keeps you alive, and that's all it does. It changes your whole way of life. I went Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm an early riser, so I went from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. And when I would finish on Monday, you know, you come back home, you rest. Tuesday, you start to feel a little better, and it's time to go back Wednesday. And then same thing with Thursday and Friday. So I really had no quality of life, and that's the bottom line. But you know, that's one of the things I focus on. As we haven't talked about much yet, but that's why I'm a member of the Kidney Transplant Connectors program sponsored by Sanofi. And we go around, and we're paired up teammates that we go around and we talk because one's a donor and one's a recipient, and we give our stories to people who are either on dialysis, about to go on dialysis, have had a transplant, had a family member that's had one, and it just gives them our story about what has happened. So like I said, I was very fortunate that my brother gave me a kidney, and that's one of the things I try to talk about most is living donor, because it's a proven fact that living donation gives you a much better chance to go ahead and have your life extended. Now, as Kimmy was talking about, Now, this is my second time around, and we'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to be my second time around.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. You mentioned a lot of other terminology there, so why don't we go to Dr. Norman to tell us a little bit more about kidney transplants, why that is considered the optimal treatment for kidney disease due to some of the challenges with dialysis, and living donation as well.
No, thank you. So when we think about kidney transplantation, I think Steve really clearly laid out why we try to move people to kidney transplant. That as revolutionary as dialysis is, he mentioned, many people don't have a good quality of life on dialysis. And we know that when people are on dialysis, they don't live as long as they should. And so we know that the optimal treatment for kidney disease, and as Steve said, kidney transplant is a treatment, not a cure for kidney disease, but the optimal treatment for kidney disease is a kidney transplant. People who receive a kidney transplant compared to dialysis, they live longer and they feel better. And this is true really across the age spectrum, from kids all the way to older adults. In general, people with a kidney transplant are going to do better. When we think about kidney transplantation in the United States, and this is, people have the option of getting a transplant either from a deceased donor or from a living donor. In the United States, most people who get a kidney transplant get that transplant from the waiting list, from a deceased donor. That can work well, but the biggest downside is that the list is long. The average waiting time in the United States is just over 4 years. And so what that means for most people is if they're waiting for a kidney transplant, then they are on dialysis 3 days a week with all the potential complications for those 4 years. Kidney transplants often, the deceased donor transplants often work very well, but occasionally they don't work, and as Steve will probably talk about, sometimes we need to retransplant people. And so we consider the optimal treatment whenever possible to be a living kidney donor transplant. And that's a transplant that could be from somebody related or unrelated. It just needs to be somebody who's healthy, who's interested in donating, and we make sure they have good kidney function. And then perhaps we could talk about a little bit at some point some of those criteria for the living donors and why it can be sometimes difficult for people to get a living donor transplant.
Awesome. Steve, back to you. As we mentioned earlier, you received not one, but 2 kidney transplants. So can you tell us a little bit more about that experience, the first and the second time around that you got the kidney transplant?
Yeah, my first kidney transplant lasted 23 years. Like I said, my brother gave me the kidney. So as you can imagine, I'm a big fan of living donation. But it was kind of crazy because after I made the 20-year mark, I thought I'm good to go. I said, this kidney will last me the rest of my life. And then that lasted for about a year, and I went in for my yearly visit. I was only going once a year. Blood draw and everything was good, and they called me back in and said, we need to do some more blood work. And I thought, uh-oh. And it was right. It was uh-oh. It was my numbers started creeping up. And we started using a series of drugs to try to, get it squared away. But the bottom line was that my kidney just started wearing out. There was no rejection, no problems. It just started wearing out. And so when they told me that, we needed to start being prepared for what was probably going to have to happen, the doctors told me that they were going to put this time in my left arm, it was a graft. My second time, I've got a fistula over here, and I know most of you have seen a fistula. It's not very attractive, but it was much easier the second time around. And then, guess what? The pandemic hit. And the pandemic, as you know, it affected everybody. And it affected us at the hospital, it affected us in the dialysis center. Everything changed. And so they told me I was going to have to go on dialysis. And that was 3 years ago when I was on dialysis. So just being on the dialysis, like I said, it just affects your whole life. I like to tell everyone, if you can get a living donor to give you a kidney, it's the best thing, mainly for your quality of life. Because before the 4 years that I dealt with just getting a new kidney, and oh, by the way, my second kidney transplant next month will be 1 year anniversary for the second one.
Round of applause. Wonderful. So thank you so much. Dr. Norman, let's hand it back to you. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is the best time to actually get a transplant? You mentioned how long the wait list is. So what should people be doing just in that time while they're waiting?
Thank you. No, it's a great question. So for all the reasons that Steve talked about related to dialysis, the best way for people to get transplanted is before they're ever on dialysis. And the best way for that to happen is that we need to evaluate and get people on the waiting list in a timely manner. We can place people on the transplant waiting list when your kidney function is 20% of normal or less. And so to do this in the best way, we should see you for your evaluation when your kidney function is 20 to 25% of normal, so that we can see you, get you fully evaluated, get all the testing that you need completed, so that when your kidney function hits 20, we're able to get you on the list and maximize the chances that you will never need dialysis.
Awesome. And I think we're running a little bit on time. We want to have a little bit of time for Q&A, but Steve, maybe we'll close it out with you. For people that are still hesitant and nervous about a kidney transplant, or even talking to their family about being a kidney donor, what is your advice for them, and how would you tell them to talk to their family?
Well, I would suggest, first of all, that you get in touch with Sanofi and us kidney transplant connectors, and it makes it easier for us because we've all been through it. And I think it's a lot easier when you hear from somebody that's been through it, rather than someone to talk to you, they've read about it, they've had people tell them about it, but when you've actually been through it, you know it has a little more impact. But if you're just talking to the family, I've had several people in Denver that have called me and said they wanted to have a family meeting. They're telling about their uncle or their dad needed a kidney, and they didn't know how to approach it. And so I was able to tell them the best way is just jump right in. When you get people, I know there's a lot of times when you can't talk yourself. You cannot. Some people just can't talk to other people about something that's going on, especially when it's a family member. It's hard to have that discussion. And I've heard people before say, hey, you should be one to do this. You should. No, it's not that easy. And it's not easy for an individual to ask for a kidney. It's not something that's easy. It's hard to do. And like I said, I have to be honest, I didn't have to go through that. My brother stepped up right away and gave me a kidney. So organizations like ours are a big help, because we can smooth the way in with your family, talk about it. And even then, sometimes that still doesn't work, but you got to give it that shot.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for being here today. And before we go to questions, just a quick reminder that the information we shared today is general health information. Thank you so much to Dr. Norman, but the best person to go to for your own specific health care and situation is your own doctor. So please remember to go talk to them if you have any specific questions about your care. Do we have any questions from the audience? Sure. I'm not sure if the mic is on. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
I think it's on. Yeah.
Now, okay, thank you. Hi, on my dad's side, I have 3 cousins. Their mother is my father's first cousin, and all 2 sisters and a brother, they all have lupus. So I was wondering, would it, no one other than those 3 have lupus? So I was wondering, would it have been on their dad's side and not their mother's side? And how would we find out? And they're also middle-aged.
So let me give a little bit of a general answer to that. One is that I think you highlight that in a lot of families, many people have diseases that may contribute to kidney disease. And so I think it's important for all of us to get screened for kidney disease, I think would be the first question. Certainly a rheumatologist could specifically look at the question of lupus and testing. I think the other thing that's worth thinking about is we know in the black community that when you have somebody with kidney disease, very often in other family members, you'll see other individuals also with kidney disease from different causes. And so it's good that you recognize sort of this medical disease in your family, and would encourage everybody to think about making sure that you're getting screened for kidney disease so that we can stay on top of our care.
Well, I'm the historian. I went back to 1792 on my dad's side. So when we have a family reunion in September, what questions should I ask?
As a kidney physician, what I would want to know for everybody was, have they been screened for kidney disease? That's really the most important thing. And that screening can be as simple as a urine test to see if you're leaking any protein in the urine, and a measurement of your kidney function.
And that's where lupus comes from?
That would test to see whether or not people had kidney disease.
Okay.
Okay, we have a
Thank
question
you.
over here.
Okay, I want to know if a person wanted to donate their kidney, would they have a problem if they had a double tube, the one that leads from the kidney to the bladder? If they had a double one, would that affect them being able to donate their kidney?
Not necessarily. So the question was about living donation and what does someone have to do to be an acceptable living kidney donor. In general, people just need to be healthy and interested in donating. We want to make sure that kidney donors have normal kidney function, so that they can donate, half of their normal kidney function, still have normal kidney function left. As you mentioned, sometimes there's some anatomic variations that all of us have that may otherwise be okay. Some may still be okay for donation, but we try to address all of those things through the donor evaluation to make sure that medically, surgically, psychosocially, this is the right thing for the donor to do.
Okay, question right here, and then we just have these last two.
Good evening. Thank you so much for sharing this vital information. I mean, it opens up my eyes and make me realize that all of us are important in all our organs. But what I wanted to know is, are there any specific symptoms related to the onset of kidney diseases?
So I think, so the question was, are there any symptoms related to the onset of kidney disease? And that may be one of the most important questions this afternoon. Because one of the challenges is that there's usually not. There are usually no symptoms of kidney disease early on, and people often only develop symptoms of their kidney disease when they have perhaps 20% or less of their kidney function available, as Steve described when he presented to the hospital. And because there's no symptoms, this is really why it's so important that all of us get screened to find out if we have or if we're at risk for kidney disease.
Hi, thank you to the panel for all your information. No, I can't stand it. I just want a quick question. What does the donor go through with the operation? What part do they play? What do they have to go through? I mean, not go through to be a donor, but at the operation, the recovery and all that. What does the donor go through at the time of the operation afterwards and stuff like that?
So the question was about living kidney donors and what they go through. First thing is that we've been doing living donor transplants successfully in this country for almost 70 years. So we have a lot of information about what happens to people years and decades after they donate, so we know it to overall be a safe thing for people to do. After the donor is approved, the donor surgery is usually a laparoscopic surgery, so people end up with usually 3 or 4 small incisions on their belly. It's about an hour and a half, 2-hour procedure. Most people in our transplant center go home 1 or 2 days after the procedure, and we expect people to be fully recovered within a month. And we know, because of the 70-year experience we have, people seem to live just as long whether they donate or not. And because this is a group of people who we've made sure don't have kidney disease, don't have serious medical disease before we let them donate, it's probably not a surprise that living donors tend to do well, over the lifespan.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, and congratulations. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. They're telling us that we have to move on to the next panel. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.